I'm really happy to be able to share with you this presentation because it's not a presentation about all the cool things that we're currently doing. It's about a journey of 4 years that I've been on this company since I started back in Latin America and being now in the global team and be able to share with you guys all the different steps and hurdles and things that have happened, including a digital transformation that is currently still transforming, that we'll be able to leverage and hopefully be able to help you and your companies and your partnerships with Adobe as well. So, first of all, a mission. We all need to be very aware of what we are doing inside a company, and what we're doing inside our department is very straightforward and simple. We want to create experiences across every single touch point that the consumer doesn't feel. That brings a lot of engagement and therefore brings purchases. The engagement part is very interesting, not because it's a fluffy marketing word, but it's because it's what is really going to bring the customer closer to the brand and, of course, closer to make a purchase. To understand a little bit more about Adidas, we have a very large community inside our social networks in our CRM database. I put some numbers in there so you can do some little math and try to figure out how big is our database. But I will leave that through there. And this is the journey that I was going to talk to you about. I started in the company back in 2013, in which we grew functionally in various markets in EMEA and Latin America and Canada and Brazil, and was very functional. We were starting doing mass communication to everyone, send a newsletter to all database, make sure that everybody gets one. But then, little by little, we started saying, hey, we need to segment. Our consumers are not liking the mass communication. We need to add more brand content. Then we started using a little bit more predictive models. We started using affinity scores. We started looking at different categories and at different levels that the consumer can actually perceive our brand. And then in 2017, the plans that we have expanded a little bit more because it's not enough to do segmentations. It's not enough to only look at a gender affinity or a channel affinity. We need to combine all these pieces together in order to be able to present the correct information to our consumers. And most importantly, if we want to have a one-on-one communication with our consumers, we also need to have a one-on-one communication within the entire organization, inside the organization. And that is the most important challenge we are going to face in the current companies where you guys are working on right now. So, as you saw, 135 million people have been receiving various amounts of newsletters. And it has been a great job. I mean, you see 10,000 campaigns. We have a big creative team in Amsterdam working on them. We have execution teams all over the world. And it's a big accomplishment to get this massive operation running on a day-to-day basis. I don't know, Chandra, do you want to say a little bit about that operation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to come back to it in the end, but obviously getting this tied together in a multinational context is as Carlo is saying, a huge challenge every day on finding out how do we drive this efficiency and how do we avoid sort of getting stuck in operational quicksand and lose the power to innovate, right? So we continuously try to automate as much as we can and take away the manual elements so we can keep everybody focused on driving more personalized communication, making it more relevant for the consumers and more impactful.
Thanks, Chandra. So this diagram right here is just part of the story so you guys can get a small glimpse of what direction we are heading into. We all have transactional messages. We all have marketing messages. We want to communicate to the consumers in the right moment of his time. But there's too much data. There's too many categories. There's too many shoes to choose from. There's too many segments. So how do we make it in an easy way in order to put all that data together? So what we did, or what we're planning to do, is create 3 different engines. And these different engines look at different kinds of information that the consumer is providing to us in very different places. The first one is the consumer engine. And the consumer engine has all the information of the consumer. Call it age, demographics, whatever, what he likes, what he doesn't like, everything is there. And we can do campaigns straight out from there. We can find a guy that likes originals, that it's from 15 to 20 years old, but there's a little bit more than that. What about the behavior that happens on the site? What about the behavior of that cookie that abandoned the cart? What do I do with that? Can I combine that with my other engine? Of course I can. Am I doing that? Are you guys doing that in your companies? But there's a little bit more. Even though I'm putting some order data, for us, purchase data is a little bit different. Purchase is the act of acquiring a product. And we use that information for targeting the consumer to maybe cross-sell a campaign, or maybe not only to sell again, but to show him a follow-up video that will increase engagement. And combining all these three engines together inside something that is called right now the interaction module powered by Adobe. You got to give me down for that one. We should be able to push marketing into various channels. And of course, there's a big piece of data and modeling, and there's an even bigger piece of content production that happens. But this is a very high-level idea of what is currently going to happen with us. And this is a more explanatory way in order to put this. Everything comes from the data. We try to put the data in different dimensions. A consumer can have a dimension of the gender, of the apparel that they like, or the shoes that they like, or if it's a single buyer or multi-buyer, you can create multiple dimensions of that. Then you extract the most valuable ones, and you create profile segments in which you create content from. That content, you put it in the same frameworks, and that framework should be utilized to show relevant communications to our consumers. And we have 5 different types of ways to allocate the relevancy of the communication that we send to our consumers inside data and content. And in the very beginning, we started doing a lot of mass communication, as I did, and we did a little bit of segmentation. But the thing is that we are moving towards our one-on-one communication. We are providing content and offers that are more relevant. We are giving a better email receipt. You know, we like to read long emails, short emails. Is there a perfect fit? No, everyone is different. So we need to understand what does each individual like. Yeah. In terms of data, we're getting a little bit more and more and more into machine learning, into trying to understand how affinity scores, in which are the scores that tell me how much I like something, live together with purchase models. And these purchase models tell me that I'm going to buy or not. And if I'm not ready to buy, don't show me commercial content, show me engaging content. And those are the main differences that we're going to see in the future. And they're a big challenge. They're a big challenge because content is not produced in that way in many of our companies. And that is things we need to trickle back to our marketing teams and say, what are our consumers going to need?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is that I think if we go years back, we used to have one of those classical discussions all the time whether we should focus on, for instance, on an email, on the branding, or on the sales, right, on the tactical offers, right? But by actually using personalization and a personalized recipe structure also for the emails, we can do both, right? Because all our customers are different, right? Some people need to engage more in the brand, and other people are actually just there for getting the good price and the good deal. So those discussions where we end up having sort of like either or black or white, or averages discussions, I mean, personalization is about moving away from averages, right? It's about doing what's right for the individual. And these 5 dimensions are really the core dimensions that we can use to personalize by.
Thanks, Chandra. And on the left, you're going to see what we were sending before, which was a long email to everyone that liked a specific category. But now we're creating multiple variations of content to be able to send it at the right time and at the right moment to the correct consumer. And I have an interesting example on how we are actually doing that today. And I love this example because we actually piloted this on the Russian market, and we had a little bit of the Russian flavor in here. So we have Igor and Vladimir. These 2 guys have almost the same age. They live in the same city, and they're wearing Adidas clothing. And they look pretty similar, so why not send in the same thing? They might end up being different. And how do we track that? So I'm going to get in here in a little bit deep inside how the interaction module works. Maybe can give some imagination of things you can do with it in your company. But I'm going to also talk about propensity scores. Just to be very clear, so everyone will understand, a propensity score, as I have mentioned before, is how much I like something, or how much prospens am I to do something. In this case, let's say he's prospens to buy originals, football, or running. So in this case, the propensity score for originals is 0.8, for football is 0.5, and for running is 0.4. So the highest one is 0.8, so that tells me, okay, the guy likes more originals, therefore I should pick originals. But if we see and go to the last side, we see that the content is fatigued. Fatigued is an attribute of the interaction module that says, if I have seen the content, don't show it again, because we don't want to bore you with a piece of content again. We can decide to put that piece of content 5 times, 1 time, 15 times, whatever times we like, depending on what kind of offer we're showing to the consumer. So since that is being already shown, I'm going to go to my next available category, which is football, and it's the best match because it doesn't have fatigue. And even though it has medium priority, and that's the second aspect of the interaction module, you got to prioritize your content of high, low, medium with numbers. It's going to the first one, to the mid one, I'm sorry, because it's just the best match at that moment. Another example with Vladimir is that the propensity score for originals is 0.7. He doesn't play football at all, 0.1. Probably he was browsing on the website and he got some points on that one. And the running one is 0.6. The highest score is 0.7. And even though that on football, the content had high business priority, it's choosing the medium one because the propensity always is going to rule overall. And if we do that, we should be able to scan through all this library of content that we have of running, training, originals, whatever, and be able to choose and pick the correct one for our consumers. And being able to do that, we should be able to differentiate the kind of newsletters that we are sending to our consumers, making them unique. The more content we can produce, the more unique we can be. And of course, we're not going to produce content for the sake of producing content. We need to understand our consumers so we can then create something for them. And once we do this, we should be able to analyze these pieces of content independently. Right now, what we are doing is checking what is the conversion rate of an X campaign. We are not checking what is the reach of this piece of content across all my devices. That's where we need to get now in the future. And as you saw, Igor and Vladimir, these dudes, both have different emails. They both look almost the same, black and white, but they perceive the brand in a different way, and we should perceive them in a different way as well. So this is a very interesting slide that tells us a little bit how much we use the progression in our database. The more we keep understanding the consumer, the more the consumer will be able to respond to us. And if you see, we have category lover scores, we have channel scores, and all this information is going to be attributed to presented across different kinds of platforms, presenting different kinds of content. And the more we understand the consumer, and the more we use that information to communicate to the consumer, the more we're going to learn from it. You want to add something else in here, Chandra?
Yeah, and I think the interesting is also we are moving away from a one-dimensional segmentation into a multi-dimensional segmentation where we can basically have sort of completely individualized profiles. So again, one consumer might actually be interested in value offers, but also be very interested in the brand, right? Where we used to sort of say, okay, you're either in one segment or another segment, but we are much more diverse than that. And actually taking an ability to build up a segmentation model or a customer DNA profile, as we call it, and then being able to activate content in the right context, where we saw it before in email, but of course also across other channels, is really the power of the personalization. And as you will see later also on how much that actually drives incremental value.
Great. And guys, as you are able to see, by understanding our consumer, we are able to slot in the correct piece of content. We might have a ton of events in a specific city, but if we are able to understand what city the consumer is in and what city the consumer likes the most, which would be, and what category he likes and what sports he likes, we should be able to tailor specifically everything that he's perceiving in our apps, in our website, in our emails, in everywhere. And this goes across categories. And we are able to scan to multiple pieces of content to achieve that.
So going a little bit into sort of how we work with this, and Giancarlo and us, we've been working together in 4 years now. And as Giancarlo said to start with, it's really been a journey of building it up. And I sit in a team that's centrally, I mean, I was just counting yesterday that we service across 21 time zones from one location. and really trying to build an efficient team that works very, very close together with the team here in Herzogenaurach and Amsterdam and across the world. And one of the core parts to that has been setting up a sort of organization model of how do we work together with all these local markets and also multiple brands, because Adidas is not just Adidas, it's also Reebok and other brands, and finding a way where we can really have a mindset of building once and deploying many, right? Because very often you end up by building the same market by market or region by region, and thereby investing in stuff that doesn't really bring you forward, right? So we're taking a very centralized approach to how we develop all these functionalities and models and scores and so on, but also have a very decentralized approach to how we create content, right? Because in the reality, relationships are always created locally, right? So what happens in the Russian market before? The people that lives in Russia and works for Adidas there and has eyes and ears on the ground obviously understands the market a lot better than we can ever do here from Germany or Amsterdam. But setting up the functions to actually facilitate advanced one-to-one or personalized communications, it's not something that should be done market by market. That is something we can do centrally and then deploy that and deliver those empowerments to the market. So that's been a key part of how we're doing that and how we're separating development and operations and support processes and so on. And something that's hugely important in any multinational company. As I said before, we have a central service model where we try to balance the things, and one of the things is really how do you, again, as I said before, find out what do you do locally and what do you do globally. And we do believe that relationships are created locally, that relevancy is driven locally, and the market situations vary by market, and competitive situations are different in different markets, right? The market in Japan is very different from the one in Germany. And therefore, we try to empower them with a global CRM platform with tools that they can use and make it really easy for the marketeers to focus on what is the right message that can get out. And also develop content centrally to those content repositories that can then be delivered to the market so they then, again, don't get too, let's say, inefficient on those parts of the processes. And then talking about processes, again, tying all this together, I mean, there is a technology component. There is a big process component where we've set up these governance rules and defined key processes. And we really have 6 key processes: a sprint process, a development process, a rollout process where we build sort of masters and roll them out to the market and give them opportunities to give local flavors, an ongoing operations or execution process, and a support process, and then a help desk process. There are other processes, but these are the core processes that basically fuels this whole part. And then besides platform or technology and process, there's of course people, right? It's really a big change management process, right? So you saw the Igor and Vladimir deck before, right? That was part of Carlo and us and the rest of the central team trying to teach and preach to the local markets what is personalization, right? Because it's hard, right? There's a lot of people out there that hasn't been doing data-driven marketing for all the years, but really needs to understand how do we move forward on that, right? So those are the 3 parts that we really try to knit together. Test and continuous improvements. We know that we don't always get it right to start with, and we don't even try to get it right to start with. We try to get to market and get some learnings and be able to optimize for it. We try to, I mean, Adidas is really trying to deploy a product mindset, right? So we think of personalization and dynamic content as a product. Instead of being a campaign or a technology or whatever, we think of it as a product that we take to market, we learn from it, we listen to it, we optimize it and take it to the next step. And we continuously run in sprints where we optimize all those different things. And that goes across basically all of the different marketing pillars. They're organized in product teams where we are part of it and multiple other stakeholders are part of it, of trying to learn from it all the time. So simple tests, right? I mean, optimizing and evaluating, for instance, the personalized emails versus non-personalized emails. How do they perform, and learn from it all the time? Simple things like different tests here of optimizing time of day or optimizing day of week or call to actions or whatever it is, right? Those are really important insights that we can leverage and take further. And one of the things we found out actually a couple of years ago was that optimal time of day is hugely important, right? It drives a lot of incremental conversions and sales if we get the time of day right. Not for all of the consumers, but per consumer, right? We did actually the test in France. Originally said, all of France, let's find out what's the optimal time of day to send to consumers in France, right? But then, of course, we're all different. I mean, I take the train in the morning, and Carlo may read his emails when the kids are to bed in the evening, and so on, right? And actually listening to when they're opening and predicting and having intelligent scores that times the communication when people are receptive to it, that's just basically respecting the consumers and treating them like humans, right? So one of the things we did for personalization was to personalize send-out times, right? So we continuously, when we send out, now we're talking about emails where we're pushing communication, have a score we calculate per individual, what is the optimal time. And if we don't hit a time where they're responsive, we try and test automatically and move to the next point. Something, again, that is easy when you build it once, right? But it's really hard to build market by market if you don't have a centralized model that can fuel this and empower this to the market, and thereby actually losing out of the business opportunities. The simple dream when we look at a lot of the communication is, of course, that, and for the people that's not embedded into this everyday things, okay, it's very easy. We just create some content, we find a target group, and we push some communications, and then we just get some revenue, right? But the reality behind all these personalizations is a high degree of complexity, right? These are different examples of different workflows we were running in US in week 3, and for Reebok in week 5, and so on. And all that is built into this central operation model that takes away the pain and makes it easier for the markets to focus on what do we say to whom at the right point in time, and then take the technology and the data and the operations in a centralized way. And then one of the things we found out was that actually a lot of things that were preventing us from doing advanced communication and marketing was the handover process we had internally, right? So we were used to brief in Excel documents or in Word documents, but there is a limitation to how many dimensions you can juggle with in Word or Excel. So we had to build up basically a whole tool that was a sort of a wizard helping the local marketeers to guide them through of selecting and building the right communication that could then be executed from the central team. And then we track, of course, performance and quality of everything we do. If we look at what the value of driving this more personalization, here is a chart where on the one axis you have performance on the horizontal action. And performance here is actually measured in revenue per message, so how much do we actually sell per email. And you have to remember, Adidas, we can only track the revenue in most markets in their e-com channel, and that's about 4% of the total revenue. So the revenue is actually a lot higher than what we can track. And then the other axis, we have personal relevance, right? So personal relevance is how targeted have we done the communication? How much have we used data, whether it's clickstream data or tracked behavior, inferred data, into actually personalizing the communication. And each of these dots are different CRM programs that we've tested and measured against. And there you can see there is a strong correlation here between the more relevant we are, the better we perform, the more we convert on it, right? There's actually a factor of 30 between the best performing and the least well performing. So it really does pay off for us to have this product mindset and continuously optimize for the personalized communication to the consumers.
Thank you, guys.